I used to think my family was just a quiet scar, until the day I watched my own Uncle Martin grab my son by the shoulders and scream in his face all over a shattered antique vase. Lucas's eyes were wild with fear, tears spilling down, and in that moment I realized every nightmare from my childhood was repeating itself through him. But the truth cut even deeper when my son accidentally recorded proof that Martin had embezzled funds from my grandmother's nursing trust. If you think this is just another ordinary family story, you're dead wrong. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next harrowing chapters of our story. Sofia gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary as the gray ribbon of Highway 400 stretched endlessly ahead. The city skyline had long since disappeared behind them, swallowed by the Ontario countryside's rolling fields and thick forests. Lucas buckled into the back seat with his favorite blue backpack, kicked his feet against the upholstery in time with the upbeat pop song on the radio. He looked so small back there, just 8 full of wonder and chatter and completely unaware of the heaviness clawing at his mother's chest. "Mom, did you really ride your bike all the way to the quarry when you were a kid?" Lucas piped up, twisting around so his bright brown eyes could lock onto hers through the rearview mirror. Sofia forced her lips into a smile. "Yeah, I did. Every Saturday when it wasn't raining. Your grandpa used to tell me not to say it was dangerous, but I'd sneak out with Aunt Grace anyway." Lucas's eyes went wide. "You were sneaky. Was it scary?" Only the first time, she admitted, though her throat tightened. Funny how easily she could slip into tales of childhood adventure, of racing down dirt paths with sunburned shoulders, laughing until her sides hurt, while ignoring the nights she'd lie awake listening to doors slam and her father's voice rise in anger. After that, it just felt free. Lucas settled back into his seat, satisfied for the moment. Sofia let out a slow breath as if trying to exhale the knotted memories, but they clung stubbornly to her ribs. The closer they drove toward Marrow Glen, the more those memories jostled for space in her mind. Her mother's sharp voice, her father's disappointed sighs, Martin's smirk when he caught her crying. The GPS announced they'd be arriving in 15 minutes. Sofia's pulse picked up. The last time she'd driven this road had been 4 years ago, after her father's funeral, a somber obligation that had ended in a shouting match on the front porch. She hadn't returned since. But when Grandma Beatrice sent the invitation to her 80th birthday celebration, complete with wobbly handwriting that said, "I'd love to see my girls together again," Sofia couldn't refuse. Not for the woman who used to sneak her extra cookies when Evelyn wasn't looking, who'd slip gentle hands into Sofia's hair and call her darling in a tone that carried no judgment. Lucas spotted a battered wooden sign as they passed, "Welcome to Marrow Glen. Population 3842. Is this it?" he asked, voice bursting with excitement. "Is this where you were born?" "Yep," Sofia said, managing a laugh. "This little town raised me, though I think it never quite knew what to do with me." They rolled into the heart of Marrow Glen, past tidy houses with wide porches and hydrangea bushes in bloom. The air felt almost syrupy with humidity, thick with late June's promise of thunderstorms. On the corner by the bakery, an old man waved. Sofia didn't recognize him, but she gave a polite nod anyway. That was the thing about small towns, they remembered you, whether you wanted them to or not. "Is Grandma's house close?" Lucas asked, bouncing slightly. His legs were too long for the booster seat these days, but he still liked the security of it. "Just a few more blocks," Sofia said. Her stomach pitched. They turned onto Maple Lane, and there it was. The house loomed at the end of the street like a monument to the past broad 2-story, its white paint peeling in long strips, the green shutters cracked by decades of harsh winters. The front yard was still dominated by the ancient sugar maple with its massive clawed roots that Sofia used to trip over, and the wraparound porch with its sagging wicker chairs looked exactly as it had when she was a little girl sneaking out at night to catch fireflies. 1,000 ghostly versions of herself seemed to flit across the lawn. She pulled up behind 2 parked cars, Martin's shiny black SUV and Evelyn's practical silver sedan. Sofia's fingers trembled as she switched off the engine. She stared at the house, remembering laughter that always seemed just a pitch too high, the way her mother's eyes would narrow when Sofia was too loud, too messy, too much. She'd thought that distance might dull those old wounds, but sitting here they felt just as raw. Lucas had already unbuckled and was leaning forward, hands on her shoulder. "Are you okay, Mom?" His voice snapped her out of it. Sofia turned, brushed a hand across his cheek, and summoned a brightness she didn't feel. "I'm okay, kiddo. Just a lot of memories here." "Good memories?" he asked hopefully. She swallowed. "Some of them, yeah. Some not so good. But you and me, we're here to make new ones, right? Lucas beamed. Right. They stepped out of the car. Heat slammed into them, heavy with the scent of cut grass and blooming lilies. As they walked up the front path, Sofia noticed the cracked stone walkway her father used to curse about every spring. He'd never gotten around to fixing it, she thought, with a hollow ache. Her heart skittered when she saw the screen door swing open. There stood Grandma Beatrice, thinner than before, her shoulders more stooped, but her smile still warm and real. Her hair was a wispy silver halo around her deeply lined face. For a moment, Sofia's eyes burned, remembering all the nights she'd snuck down to her grandmother's room to hide from slammed doors and shouts. "My sweet Sofia," Beatrice's croaked voice, watery with emotion. "And is this my big boy Lucas? Come give Grandma Bea a hug." Lucas darted forward and wrapped skinny arms around her waist. Beatrice clung to him, eyes squeezed shut, as if anchoring herself to this small bundle of youth and possibility. Then she opened her arms to Sofia, who stepped into her grandmother's embrace with a stiffness she couldn't entirely shake. "You look so much like your mama did at your age," Beatrice whispered, pulling back to study Sofia's face with moist eyes. "But there's something softer in you. Always was." Sofia tried to smile. Over Beatrice's shoulder, she could see through the screen door into the dark hallway, smell the faint tang of lemon polish on old wood. Shadows gathered there, whispering of the girl who used to hide behind the staircase. Come in," Beatrice urged. "It's too hot to stand on ceremony. There's lemonade in the kitchen. Evelyn's inside, helping me fuss with the cake." That name made Sofia flinch, even though she tried to mask it. Lucas squeezed her hand, oblivious to the deeper undercurrents. Together they stepped inside, crossing a threshold that felt far more loaded than it should. The hallway was dim and cool, the walls lined with faded photographs, Sofia at 7 clutching a trophy at the spelling bee Martin in his football uniform. Evelyn on her wedding day, unsmiling even then. The scent of lavender potpourri battled with something older, must memory time itself. Sofia's heart hammered as she heard familiar clipped footsteps. Then her mother appeared at the end of the hall, dressed in a crisp cream blouse and pearl earrings, her face set in that habitual half-frown that seemed etched there by decades of disappointment. "Well," Evelyn said, crossing her arms, "you made it. I half expected you to come up with some excuse again." "Hello, Mom," Sofia managed, her voice tight. "We wouldn't miss Grandma's birthday." Evelyn's eyes flicked down to Lucas, a brief softening, then back to cool appraisal. "Lucas, you've grown. I suppose boys do that." Lucas shuffled behind Sofia, clearly uncertain how to respond to this grandmother he'd only met twice. Beatrice swept in to rescue them with a gentle hand on Evelyn's arm. "Enough of that. Let them breathe. Come to the parlor, darling. Tell me all about Toronto." As they followed her, Sofia caught sight of the staircase, the one she used to curl up beneath, clutching her knees, trying to disappear when voices rose and doors slammed. Her throat closed. But then Lucas tugged her wrist, beaming. "Mom, this house is so big, can we explore later?" Sofia nodded, managing a tremulous smile as they stepped into the parlor, sunlight spilling through lace curtains to paint the dust motes gold. If this was the beginning of old ghosts rising, then so be it. She was here now with Lucas's small hand warm in hers, and for his sake she would face whatever shadows this house still held. Sofia perched on the edge of the stiff floral couch in the parlor, her shoulders drawn so tight it felt like her collarbones might crack. Across from her, Evelyn sat in the high-backed chair like a queen on a faded throne, her spine impossibly straight, her hands folded neatly over her lap. Around her throat was the inevitable string of creamy pearls, each one gleaming in the afternoon light that filtered through lace curtains. They looked cold to Sofia, almost sharp, like they could cut right into skin if pressed. "Is Toronto treating you well?" Evelyn asked, finally voice clipped, as though politeness was something she rationed in careful teaspoons. "It's fine," Sofia said. She picked at an invisible thread on her dress. "Busy, work is steady." "An architect," Evelyn murmured, her mouth pulling into a tight line that pretended to be approval, but failed to reach her eyes. "Not exactly what your father envisioned, but I suppose it pays the bills." Sofia's jaw twitched. A lifetime of learning to swallow her retorts kept her from biting back. She could almost hear her father sigh. "Why do you always have to argue, Sofia?" So instead she lifted her chin slightly and said nothing. From the hallway came the joyful shrieks of Lucas chasing after a cat he'd spotted moments before. Beatrice chuckled from her perch on the arm of the couch. "That boy has more energy than Martin did at twice his age." Evelyn sniffed. "Yes, well, boys will be boys, but they need direction. I hope you're not letting him grow up completely wild, Sofia. Children need firm boundaries." Lucas dashed into the room just then, nearly colliding with the coffee table. He stopped, short eyes sparkling. Grandma, do you really have secret staircases in this house? I found a little door behind the pantry. Beatrice laughed, a sound full and real. That's just the old root cellar access, darling. But if you'd like, maybe tomorrow I'll show you the attic. Plenty of mysteries up there. Evelyn's lips tightened further. There's no need to encourage foolishness. This house needs order, not more chaos. Sofia swallowed around the knot in her throat, forcing a smile at her son. Go on, explore a little more, but stay where I can hear you, okay? Lucas grinned and zipped off, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. As soon as he was out of sight, Evelyn let out a soft sigh. Honestly, Sofia, you coddle him too much. That boy needs discipline or he'll end up reckless. A dozen sharp retorts danced on Sofia's tongue like, Martin, is that the kind of discipline you mean? But she said nothing, letting silence stretch between them until it grew brittle. Beatrice patted her hand in silent solidarity. Moments later, Martin strutted in through the foyer like he owned the air itself. He had always moved that way, confident shoulders back, chin high. The smell of expensive cologne trailed behind him, cutting through the house's musty lavender. He wore tailored slacks and a crisp blue shirt, with the sleeves carefully rolled to showcase a watch that probably cost more than Sofia's last month's rent. Well, look who finally decided to show up, he boomed, voice echoing off the high ceiling. He bent to press a showy kiss on Evelyn's cheek, then clapped Beatrice's shoulders with rough affection. His eyes found Sofia raked over her with a grin that didn't reach anywhere near sincerity. Little sister, or I guess cousin Sofia, since I'm your uncle, always gets muddy in small families. Sofia bristled at the dig but offered a thin smile. Hello, Martin. He dropped into an armchair, legs splayed, wide arms draping over the sides as if to mark his territory. You still driving that sad little hatchback? Or did the big city finally convince you to upgrade? It works fine, Sofia said coolly. Gets Lucas and me where we need to go. Martin barked a laugh. Well, some of us aim a little higher. He jutted his chin toward the window. Just picked up a new BMW. Fully loaded carbon package. Figured I deserved a little reward after the quarter I had. Evelyn's eyes lit up. Oh, Martin, your father would have been so proud. He always said you had the head for business. Martin winked at her. He wasn't wrong. Made partner last month. Bonus alone could have bought this whole house twice over. Beatrice's smile faltered. Sofia watched her grandmother's fingers worry at the hem of her cardigan. The house had been in the family for nearly a century. To hear Martin toss it around like just another asset, it made something inside her twist. Sofia stayed silent, tracing invisible patterns into her knee. Lucas's laughter rang out somewhere down the hall, and she let it anchor her. Whatever else happened here, she would not let them dim that light in him. Dinner's ready, Evelyn announced, standing abruptly. Martin, would you carve? I'll set out the salad. They moved to the dining room, an echo chamber of polished oak and heavy drapes. The table groaned under platters of roasted chicken, golden potatoes, buttered green beans. Martin carved with theatrical flourishes, dropping slices of breast meat onto plates with the smug satisfaction of a man holding court. Throughout the meal, conversation skittered from local politics to Martin's real estate ventures. Every time he spoke, Evelyn's face lit up, nodding along like he was reciting gospel. Beatrice mostly listened, eyes drifting off into Lucas, who picked at his potatoes with innocent distraction. Sofia felt like she was underwater, voices coming in, warped the air, pressing down on her lungs. Her fork scraped across her plate. Martin was regaling them with some story about a golf trip to Muskoka with big clients, very hush-hush. And you should have seen the look on the seller's face when I offered cash up front. Closed in under 48 hours. Martin leaned back, hands behind his head, smugness rolling off him in waves. You don't get that kind of deal unless people respect you, or fear you. Same thing most days. Evelyn laughed, delighted. That's my boy. Lucas, ever curious, piped up. Why would someone be scared of you, Uncle Martin? The question was so pure it sliced through the table's fragile composure. Martin blinked, then let out a barking laugh. It's just an expression sport. Means I'm very good at my job. Lucas nodded, though confusion clouded his eyes. Sofia reached under the table to squeeze his hand. He squeezed back. A beat later, Lucas asked to be excused. When Evelyn nodded distractedly, he bounded up from his chair and disappeared back toward the parlor. The adults fell back into strained chatter. Then somewhere distant, a sharp crack, a hollow, unmistakable sound of porcelain shattering. Silence slammed over the room so suddenly it was deafening. Sofia's stomach dropped. Martin's face, hardened mouth, thinning to a cruel line. Evelyn drew in a breath so sharp it seemed to cut the air. Sofia pushed back from her chair, her napkin sliding to the floor. She found Lucas standing in the hallway, hands clamped over his mouth, eyes wide and already rimmed with tears. At his feet lay the wreckage of a delicate vase, china white with blue hand-painted cranes, its shards scattered like brittle confetti across the hardwood. "I didn't mean to—" Lucas stammered, voice breaking. "I was just trying to pet the cat," and Sofia dropped to her knees, reaching for him, but before she could pull him close, Martin's heavy steps thundered behind her. "For Christ's sake," he exploded, looming over them. "That was a Qing dynasty replica from my last trip to Beijing. You know how much that cost me?" His hand slashed through the air as if to emphasize the point. "It was just an accident," Sofia said quickly, her voice trembling. Martin's nostrils flared. "An accident that wouldn't have happened if you taught your kid how to act in someone else's house." Lucas whimpered, shrinking into Sofia's side. Sofia rose, shielding him with her body. Her heart pounded so loud she could barely hear her own words. "He's 8, Martin. Accidents happen." Martin leaned down so close she could smell the sour tang of wine on his breath. "Maybe you should have thought of that before letting a little brat run wild." Evelyn's voice cut in, then smooth, cold, devastating. "Sofia, you really should keep a tighter rein on him. A child with no discipline is a reflection of his mother." Sofia turned to her mother, stunned. For a heartbeat, she saw exactly what Lucas must be seeing, the impenetrable wall of judgment, the same one that had once towered over her as a girl. But before she could respond, Lucas broke into sobs, burying his face in Sofia's hip, and that was all it took for every fragile piece to shatter just like the vase at their feet. Martin's face turned a furious shade of red, the vein near his temple pulsing as if it might burst. Without warning, he lunged forward, one meaty hand clamping down on Lucas's thin shoulder. The boy let out a startled yelp, his small frame jolting under Martin's iron grip. "You insolent little brat," Martin snarled, his breath hot and sour, with red wine eyes boring into Lucas's terrified face. "Do you have any idea what you've done? That vase was worth more than your mother's entire year's salary?" Lucas's mouth trembled open, but no words came out, just a small, strangled whimper. His eyes darted wildly to Sofia, pleading, and that was all it took to snap something primal inside her. Before her brain could fully process what she was doing, Sofia's hand shot out and slapped Martin's arm away hard enough to break his hold. "Don't you touch my son?" she hissed, her voice cracking like a whip through the hushed hallway. Martin recoiled, eyes wide in genuine shock. No one ever dared challenge him, certainly not Sofia. The brief flash of surprise quickly twisted into an uglier sneer. "Oh, there it is. The infamous Sofia attitude. Still soft as ever, hiding behind your big words and your delicate little kid. No wonder." "Stop it!" Sofia cut in, her breath coming in shallow, ragged bursts. She positioned herself squarely between Martin and Lucas, her arms spread as if to block off an advancing wolf. Her heart pounded so hard she thought she might be sick. "You want to bully someone, pick on someone your own size, because if you ever lay a hand on my son again—" Martin let out a humorless bark of laughter. "Or what? You'll what Sofia call your big city lawyer, please. You forget whose roof you're under." A sound sliced through the tense air, an elegant, deliberate throat clearing. Evelyn stood at the archway, her pearl necklace catching the dull yellow light of the hallway lamp. Her face was a cold mask of disappointment. "What is all this commotion?" she demanded, voice carefully measured, each syllable clipped. Her eyes darted from the shards on the floor to Lucas's tear-streaked face to Sofia's shaking shoulders. Then her gaze settled on Martin, softening just slightly. "Martin, please go pour yourself some water. Cool down." Martin lingered, jaw-working eyes locked on Sofia with a look that promised this wasn't over. Then he pivoted sharply and stomped down the hall toward the kitchen, muttering under his breath. Sofia tried to catch her breath. Her hands were still half-raised fingers curved like claws. Only when Lucas pressed himself fully into her side did she lower them, wrapping him in a protective hug. His body was trembling so violently it broke her heart. Evelyn sighed, stepping closer. "Really, Sofia, you've always been so melodramatic. If you disciplined your child properly, these scenes wouldn't happen." Sofia's head snapped up. "Melodramatic. He was hurting Lucas. He scared him. Look at him. He's shaking." Evelyn arched an eyebrow. "Children shake when they're reprimanded. That's part of learning consequences." That wasn't reprimanding, that was intimidation. That was Sofia cut herself off, teeth sinking into her lower lip until she tasted blood, because she knew exactly what it was. It was the same towering rage, the same crushing hand on her shoulder when she was Lucas's age and broke a ceramic horse, the same tears she'd swallowed alone in her dark bedroom afterward. But Evelyn only clicked her tongue. "If you coddle him this way, he'll grow up weak, unprepared for how harsh the world really is. And you, Sofia, you were always so sensitive, so fragile. It's why you ran off to Toronto instead of staying here building something real." Sofia felt her chest constrict. It was like Evelyn kept a dagger hidden behind those pearls, always ready to plunge it between her ribs with clinical precision. Her throat burned, but she forced herself to stand taller to keep her voice calm. Maybe it's not weakness. Maybe it's empathy. Or compassion. Two things this house could have used more of. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, sharp as glass. For a moment, Sofia thought her mother might actually say something honest, some tiny flicker of admission. But then Evelyn's gaze cooled again into polite disgust. "Don't start with your psychological babble. Help your grandmother clear the table, then put your boy to bed. Tomorrow's a big day." Sofia didn't trust herself to speak. She only nodded stiffly, took Lucas's hand and steered him toward the narrow staircase. Each step creaked under their combined weight, echoing like tiny accusations in the dim house. In the small guest room tucked under the eaves, Lucas climbed straight into bed without being told. He curled up on his side, clutching the corner of his pillow like it was a lifeline. His dark hair was still damp from sweat and tears clinging to his forehead in little curls. Sofia perched beside him on the mattress, brushing those curls back gently. "I'm so sorry, baby," she whispered. "I shouldn't have let him talk to you that way, or touch you." Lucas didn't respond right away. He just burrowed deeper into the pillow. After a few moments, he mumbled, "Did I do something really bad, Mom? Was that vase super special?" Sofia's chest cracked clean in two. "No, Lucas, it was just a thing. Things can be replaced. You can't. Nothing you did deserved that." "But Grandma seemed so mad, and Uncle Martin, he looked like he hated me." "He doesn't hate you. He has problems that have nothing to do with you." The lie burned on her tongue. The truth was, Martin did hate anything small, anything vulnerable, anything that might remind him of softness, of weakness, of himself. Lucas sniffled. "I didn't mean to. I was trying to follow the kitty and I tripped." I know exactly what happened, and I promise you nobody's ever going to hurt you while I'm around. Ever." His little shoulders shuddered. Sofia stretched out on the bed, pulling him tight against her so his back was flush with her chest. Her arms wrapped around him in a protective cocoon. For long minutes, neither of them spoke. The old house groaned around them, settling on its ancient foundation, the wind scraping against the windows. Somewhere below, Sofia could hear Evelyn's muted voice, probably fussing about dessert platters or floral arrangements. Lucas finally sighed. "I wish we could go home." Sofia kissed the top of his head. "Soon," she promised. "We're not staying forever. Just a few days for Grandma's birthday. Then we'll be back in our apartment where you can sing at the top of your lungs and knock over whatever you want." Lucas let out a weak little laugh. It wasn't much, but it was something. They lay there until his breathing evened out the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest, letting Sofia know he'd finally slipped into sleep. But she stayed wide awake, staring at the ceiling where faint water stains bloomed like bruises. Her mind replayed the way Martin's hand had clamped down on her son's shoulder, the way Evelyn had dismissed it all with that cold, clinical precision. Sofia squeezed Lucas tighter. Under her breath so soft it was nearly inaudible, she made a vow to the dim shadows. "No one is ever going to make you feel small or scared in this family again. I will burn this whole legacy down before I let it touch you." It sounded dramatic even to her own ears. But in that narrow bed with Lucas's warmth pressed against her, it also sounded exactly right. Sofia felt something settle inside her, something resolute, ironclad. This trip had begun as an olive branch, a fragile hope to mend old ties. But now it was about protection, about drawing lines that would not be crossed, not by Martin, not by Evelyn, not by any of them. Because if her childhood had taught her anything, it was that monsters wore familiar faces. And sometimes the only way to keep your child safe was to stop pretending they weren't monsters at all. Sofia padded quietly down the creaky hallway, a small amber bottle rattling in her hand. The dim sconce lights along the wall sputtered every so often, giving everything a sickly flicker. In her palm, the label on the bottle read, "Lisinopril Grandma Beatrice's blood pressure meds." Just another tiny duty in a house full of big, ugly histories. She paused at the top of the stairs to catch her breath. Down below, she could hear Evelyn's voice floating out from the kitchen, issuing instructions to whoever was unlucky enough to be underfoot. The brittle melody of her mother's commands made Sofia's stomach churn. Her entire body still thrummed with the ghost of Martin's hand on Lucas's shoulder, of her own fury at the way Evelyn had dismissed it all like spilled salt. Focus. Grandma first. Lucas was safe upstairs, no Martin to loom over him. Everything else could wait. She knocked lightly on the bedroom door. "Grandma, it's Sofia. Got your pills." Come in, baby. Inside, the air was warm and faintly floral. Beatrice reclined in a nest of quilts, her frail hands folded over her belly. Her papery skin seemed almost translucent in the lamplight, every blue vein a roadmap of time. Yet her eyes were sharp as ever. Sofia poured water into a tumbler from the glass carafe on the nightstand. Here we go, just like the doctor ordered. Beatrice took the pill, then sipped water carefully. When she set the glass down, she reached out, curling her fingers around Sofia's wrist. Don't let your mother rattle you. She's always been hard, harder than she needs to be. Sofia tried to smile. I'm used to it. That's what worries me, Beatrice murmured, her voice dropping. A girl shouldn't have to get used to being carved up by her own family. Something splintered behind Sofia's ribs. She squeezed her grandmother's hand back. Rest. We'll talk tomorrow, okay? Beatrice nodded, eyes already slipping closed. Tomorrow, darling. Sofia tucked the quilt a little tighter around her. Then she tiptoed out, easing the door shut until only a thin line of light fell across the floor. Down the hall she heard a familiar giggle. Lucas. A sweet, silly sound that always felt like home no matter where they were. Sofia followed it, needing that tiny anchor. She found Lucas sprawled on the carpet in the little sitting room by the stairwell. The old lace curtains stirred behind him from an open window, letting in a soft summer breeze. The faintest scent of lilacs drifted through. In Lucas's lap sat the small blue digital recorder she'd gotten him for his birthday, a cheap thing with cartoon animal stickers that could record little stories or songs. Right now, Lucas was whispering into it, then pressing play and dissolving into laughter when it echoed back in his own tinny voice. Hey, buddy, Sofia said, letting out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. What you up to? Lucas beamed. Practicing being a spy. Listen. He hit a button. The recorder chirped out a snippet of his squeaky voice. Lucas is the coolest kid ever over. Then another press I'm hiding from the evil cat overlord. Over. Sofia laughed despite everything ruffling his hair. Very official spy business, I see. But then Lucas's grin turned mischievous. Oh, I want to show you something funny. Earlier, I was looking for the cat, and I left this on by accident like real spies do. It recorded Uncle Martin talking on the phone. It sounded all secret and serious. Sofia felt her pulse hitch. What do you mean secret? Lucas rewound it expertly, his little fingers jabbing at the buttons. Here, listen, it's weird. She accepted the recorder with a half smile, sure it would be Martin bragging about golf or some business nonsense. But as soon as she pressed play, her heart stuttered. I told you to move the funds by Friday. I don't care what she thinks it's for. It's my investment portfolio, not her retirement cushion. If Evelyn starts asking questions, you stall her. Understand I didn't funnel money through that so-called senior enrichment trust just to have it sit there paying for art classes and community picnics. There was a pause on the line, then Martin again, low and sharp. Yeah, well, if this merger tanks, I'll just roll the losses. It's not like any of those old bats will even notice. They're busy knitting baby hats for cancer kids. A hollow roar filled Sofia's ears. Her mouth went dry, hands turning clammy around the recorder. Martin's voice continued in its oily self-assuredness, detailing percentages and discrete invoices. But Sofia could barely process it. She pressed stop, her thumb trembling. Lucas watched her with bright curiosity. Wasn't that funny? He was talking so mean like in cartoons when the villain says his evil plan out loud. Sofia's stomach twisted. Yeah, very cartoonish. Can I play it again? I like your shocked face, Lucas giggled. She swallowed hard, forcing her expression into something neutral. Maybe later. Can I hold on to this for a bit? It's, very interesting. Super spy stuff. Lucas puffed out his chest proud. Okay, I'm your secret agent now. Sofia managed a watery laugh. Best one I could ever ask for. He trotted off, likely in search of the cat again. As soon as he was out of sight, Sofia sagged against the wall, pressing a hand to her forehead. Her mind raced the air, seeming thinner by the second. Martin was siphoning money out of Beatrice's trust. Money meant for the entire retirement community art supplies outings, even basic facility maintenance. He was gambling it all on some private deal that might tank tomorrow and didn't give a damn who it hurt. And Evelyn. Did she know? Was she turning a blind eye because it was Martin? Because that's what mothers did for sons who could do no wrong. Sofia replayed the snippet once more, making sure she hadn't misheard. The words were unmistakable. Her entire childhood, the unspoken rule was protect the family at all costs. Keep it neat, keep it quiet, keep the dirty bits buried under thick rugs and expensive furniture. But this was more than bruised feelings or sharp words. This was outright fraud, elder abuse, maybe even criminal negligence if the funds collapse hurt other residents. She looked around the sitting room as if expecting Martin to storm in, snatch the recorder from her hands, and laugh in her face. The house suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing closer, full of eyes and secrets. No, she thought fiercely, not this time. You're not the girl cowering under the staircase anymore. With a deep breath, Sofia tucked the recorder into her pocket, making sure it was secure. Her pulse still raced. Her skin prickled like she'd just stepped into icy water, but underneath all that bloomed something new, sharp electric, resolve. Lucas's voice drifted from down the hall, humming a tuneless little song. Her eyes stung. He had no idea what he'd uncovered by playing at spies. No idea he might have just saved his great-grandmother's security and dozens of other fragile old lives. Sofia ran her hand over the recorder one more time, grounding herself. Whatever came next, she would protect him from it, just like she'd promised. And if Martin thought he could keep running this family on fear and intimidation, he was about to learn how wrong he was. Sofia stood in the dimly lit guest room, the door locked behind her. Lucas, finally asleep on the narrow bed, with his stuffed fox tucked under his chin. Her hands were clammy as she cupped the little blue recorder like it was a fragile explosive device. She had replayed the snippet a dozen times already, Martin's oily voice winding around her neck like a noose. If Evelyn starts asking questions, you stall her. Understand I didn't funnel money through that so-called senior enrichment trust just to have it sit there. Her pulse thudded so violently she could see it fluttering in the hollow of her throat. Sofia sank onto the edge of the bed. It was all too vivid, Martin's hand on Lucas earlier that day, the smug way he'd leaned over her like he could break her with a sneer. Now she had proof that he was hurting more than just feelings. He was endangering Grandma Beatrice and every old woman who counted on that money to pay for medicine outings' basic care. And Evelyn, God, did her mother know? Was she quietly smoothing it over like she smoothed over every ugly thing this family ever produced? Sofia squeezed her eyes shut. For a second she was 8 again, crouched behind the staircase, while Evelyn murmured, "Don't tell your father. It'll only upset him. We handle our own problems in this house." Maybe that's what terrified her most, because handling it in this house always meant swallowing the truth until it poisoned you from the inside. A sudden clarity hit her like a slap. She couldn't unhear that recording, couldn't tuck it away out of family loyalty, not if it meant Beatrice and others like her might lose everything. Her eyes darted to the clock on the nightstand. 11:17 p.m. The house was finally quiet, settled into the uneasy sleep of old bones. Sofia stood and crept to the door, easing it open. The hallway was dark, only a faint lamp at the far end near the sitting room burning low. She padded silently across the carpet, careful not to hit the floorboards she knew from childhood would shriek under her weight. Martin's room was at the end of the hall door, slightly ajar, a sliver of warm light spilling out. Her stomach flipped. If he was in there, if he saw her. But she peered inside and found it empty. The bed neatly made the TV dark. The hush was almost eerie. On the large oak desk by the window lay a mess of folders, loose papers, a sleek silver laptop in sleep mode. A half-drunk glass of scotch stood sentinel, catching a shard of lamplight. Sofia slipped in and shut the door behind her. Her hand hovered over the lamp switch. No light, she decided. Her eyes would adjust. Better to work blind than risk being caught red-handed. She started with the folders. Most were dull enough market analyses contract drafts. But then she found a ledger thick with neatly printed spreadsheets and annotated margins in Martin's precise, angular handwriting. Her breath caught when she flipped to a page marked Marrow Glen Enrichment Trust. Line after line showed steady withdrawals, some with innocuous labels like renovation estimate, community art supplies, bonus staff luncheon. Then came a $12,000 withdrawal with only Q3 adjustment written beside it. Another for $18,500 tagged Miss C consultant fees. The numbers didn't make sense, especially stacked together in a single month. Sofia's fingers trembled as she took out her phone and snapped photo after photo. Each click of the shutter felt deafening. Her ears strained for the sound of footsteps on the hall, her skin prickling. She was sure any second Martin would burst and catch her rifling through his secrets, wrap those meaty hands around her neck. She forced herself to keep going, turning to the next tab labeled Strategic Funds. More entries with cryptic notes like bridge loan coverage and early investor payout. Then another line item referencing the very same trust now crossed with arrows, pointing to a separate offshore transfer. Her throat closed. This was fraud, plain as day. Money meant for elderly care being siphoned into Martin's personal speculative ventures. A small gasp escaped her, too quiet for anyone but herself. Sofia wiped sweat from her upper lip. Her mind raced. Who else was complicit? Could Evelyn truly be that blind? Or was she turning her face deliberately the same way she had all Sofia's childhood? The lamp on the nightstand wobbled slightly from her elbow, brushing it, and the clink of the glass lampshade startled her so badly she nearly dropped her phone. Her heart thundered. She carefully steadied it, swallowing bile. When she felt she had enough photos, she eased the papers back into place exactly how she found them. Then she turned to the laptop. It was password locked. Of course. Her hands hovered over the keys. She tried Martin 1980 on a desperate whim, his birth year one he bragged about endlessly at family dinners. Denied. She exhaled shakily. Too risky to keep guessing. She glanced around, spotted a leather notepad on the corner of the desk. Flipping it open revealed neat bullet points for meetings, golf tee times, then near the bottom, ML 1980 Clad Glen. Her pulse skipped. She typed it into the laptop. The machine unlocked with a soft chime. She nearly sobbed in relief. Emails burst across the screen. She scanned quickly, looking for anything tied to the trust. In a folder labeled Diversification Strategy, she found 3 chains from Martin to someone named Petrov Capital, subject line reallocation from MG Seniors Trust. She snapped photos of the monitor with her phone, each capture a damning nail. She didn't have time to read every word. Just gather, she could comb it all later. Then she carefully signed out, wiped the edge of the laptop to remove any fingerprints she might have left, silly maybe, but she wasn't thinking straight. She tucked the leather notepad back where she found it, took a steadying breath, and cracked the door to check the hall. Still empty, still safe for now. Sofia padded back to her room, her entire body buzzing with adrenaline. When she closed the guest room door behind her, she pressed her forehead to the wood, eyes squeezed shut. This was real. It was happening. And somehow, despite how terrified she was, a deep iron certainty began to settle under her ribs. She wouldn't run from this. Not again. With shaky hands, she fished out her phone and scrolled to Jared L., her old friend from law school who now worked corporate fraud in Toronto. It was nearly midnight, but she didn't care. The phone rang 4 times before a groggy voice answered. Sofia, haven't heard from you since, are you okay? Jared, she whispered, throat raw. I need your help. I think I've uncovered financial exploitation, elder abuse. My uncle, he's been draining my grandmother's trust fund, funneling it into private investments. A pause. Then Jared's tone turned all business. Are you safe right now? Is your son safe? Yes, for now. But listen, I have recordings, paper trails, bank transfers. I don't know if my mother's involved. I don't know if the local authorities would even handle it properly. All right. First, don't confront him. Don't mention a word. Keep collecting. Screenshot everything, email copies to yourself and to someone you trust. Don't store it only on your phone. If it's this large, it could be criminal. Civil at minimum. Sofia's breath trembled out in short bursts. I feel like I'm going to throw up. You're doing the right thing. This is fraud by the sound of it, potentially hundreds of thousands if it's a structured trust. If he gets wind of you snooping, he might try to erase evidence or intimidate you. So you stay quiet. Keep acting normal. Normal. Like nothing was wrong. Like Martin hadn't nearly crushed Lucas's shoulder in that same hallway hours earlier. Like her mother wouldn't defend him with cool rationalizations. Okay, she breathed. Okay, I'll keep digging. Call me tomorrow in daylight. We'll start mapping out next steps. If you feel unsafe anytime, walk out. Police first, me second. They hung up, and Sofia sank to the floor, head in her hands. For the first time in years, maybe ever, she realized she was going to break the cycle. No more swallowing poison just because it was served on family china. In the quiet dark, she glanced at Lucas's sleeping shape, the little fox clutched tight under his chin. Her hands stopped shaking. Because this wasn't just about money. This was about teaching her son that you didn't have to stay silent when wrong was done in the name of family. This was about rewriting the story, so he'd never grow up thinking cruelty was something to excuse. And Sofia, breathing deeply, finally understood she was willing to risk everything for that. Sofia stood in Martin's room again, her pulse drumming in her ears as she flipped through the thick folder of quarterly statements she'd found wedged behind a leather-bound portfolio. Her phone's camera flashed in the dim light, capturing line after line of questionable transfers and obscure consulting payouts. The flash seemed blinding in the gloom, lighting up the walls in brief, stark bursts like a crime scene. She barely dared to breathe. Each photo she snapped felt like she was digging her own grave, yet stopping wasn't an option. She could hear Martin's voice in her head, slick with contempt. This is bigger than you, Sofia. Stay in your lane. Well, this time she wasn't staying anywhere he told her to. She turned another page. Another hefty withdrawal. Another vague investment disbursement. Her fingers shook so badly the papers rattled. She steadied herself, held her breath, snapped the shot. A creak sounded behind her, the unmistakable moan of an old floorboard under weight. She whirled around. The door stood open, she hadn't even heard it click, and there, framed by the dim hallway light, was Evelyn. Her mother's silhouette was stiff-rigid. Sofia's heart stuttered. For a moment, the two women just stared at each other across the small room, neither moving. Then Evelyn stepped forward, her heels biting into the carpet with delicate, practiced precision. Her face emerged into the lamplight, calm, composed mouth pinched in a tight line. Around her throat gleamed the familiar strand of pearls, bright and cold against her skin. "What exactly do you think you're doing in here?" Evelyn asked, her voice so soft it was somehow more menacing than a shout. Sofia's throat went dry. She tried to swallow. "I was looking through Martin's documents." Evelyn's eyes dropped to the open folder on the desk, to Sofia's phone, still clutched in her hand. Her nostrils flared. "Looking or stealing, photographing private business records." "It's not private if it's stolen money," Sofia shot back before she could stop herself. Her voice cracked on the word stolen. Evelyn's eyebrows lifted a fraction. "Stolen. What exactly are you accusing your uncle of, Sofia?" Sofia forced herself to hold her mother's gaze. Her heart felt like it was trying to punch its way out of her chest. "He's funneling money out of Grandma's enrichment trust. Money that's supposed to pay for activities and improvements at the retirement home. He's diverting it into private deals, speculative investments. That's fraud. That's elder exploitation, Mom." Evelyn let out a soft, disdainful exhale, almost a laugh. "Is that what you've built up in your head, my God? Always so dramatic, always so eager to point fingers." Sofia took a step forward, shaking her phone at her mother like it was a smoking gun. "I have recordings, Mom. Lucas accidentally picked up a call Martin talking about moving the funds, telling someone to stall you if you ask questions. I've got emails ledgers. This isn't speculation." Lucas, Evelyn repeated, as if tasting something unpleasant on her tongue. "You're dragging your little boy into your paranoia now. That's low, Sofia, even for you." "He's a kid, Mom. He stumbled on it by accident." But Sofia's voice wavered, then firmed again. "You have a choice now. You can help stop this before it gets worse, before it ruins Grandma, before it blows back on this whole family, or you can keep pretending nothing's wrong." Evelyn's face didn't change. If anything, it hardened into marble, each line said in chilly resolve. "Martin is trying to build something for this family, to secure us all long after your grandmother is gone. That trust. It's supposed to be for her. For the other seniors," Sofia interrupted, her voice breaking. "Not for Martin's personal slush fund. He's gambling with people's lives, people who trust us, who trusted this family to protect them." Evelyn's eyes narrowed to cold slits. "You've never understood how these things work. Money has to move. It needs to grow. Otherwise it dies, and families like ours die with it. Your uncle is making sure that doesn't happen." Sofia laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that made her ribs ache. "So it's okay if Grandma's friends can't afford their prescriptions, or the community center has to shut down, because Martin needs to keep up his payments on a new BMW. "That is an ugly, small-minded way of looking at it," Evelyn said icily. "Your father would be ashamed of you." Sofia reeled like she'd been slapped. Her breath stuttered in her lungs. Don't you dare drag Dad into this. You stood by while he crushed me for being too sensitive, too soft. Now you're standing by while Martin literally steals from old people." For a moment, Evelyn's mouth trembled, the smallest, quickest crack. Then it firmed again. "Martin is protecting our reputation. The Thompson name means something in this town. You would risk all of that over, what, a few misdirected funds? A few bookkeeping technicalities? You'd air this dirty laundry, embarrass us all, make us look like criminals to strangers who will never understand what it takes to maintain a family's standing." Sofia couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her whole body went cold. "You'd rather keep this secret, let Martin ruin everything, than admit he did something wrong. You'd rather protect the family's image than protect actual people." "It's always been about the family," Sofia Evelyn whispered almost gently. "That's what you've never grasped. We sacrifice for family, we close ranks. We don't run to outsiders the minute something gets uncomfortable." "Maybe that's why this family is so screwed up," Sofia said, her voice strangled with grief. "Because you think loyalty means covering up betrayal. Because you've spent your entire life pretending problems don't exist, smoothing them over with tea parties and pearl necklaces." Evelyn's jaw clenched. "You listen to me. You will delete whatever you've recorded. You will stop this nonsense. And you will not tear this family apart over something you don't fully understand." Sofia met her mother's gaze, searching desperately for even a flicker of uncertainty, some sign that beneath all that cold calculation was still the woman who used to brush Sofia's hair while humming under her breath. But all she saw was steel. "I'm not deleting anything," Sofia said, her voice low and shaking but unwavering. "I'm going to protect Grandma and all those people who trust that fund to keep them safe, even if it means burning every last bridge in this family." Evelyn's eyes glistened. For a split second, the woman looked almost afraid. Then the mask snapped back into place. "Then you are no daughter of mine." The words sliced through Sofia clean and deep, but strangely, they didn't destroy her. Instead, a calm certainty settled in her chest. She nodded once stiffly. Then so be it. She pushed past Evelyn into the hall. Her mother didn't try to stop her, just stood there, hand resting against the doorframe as if she needed it to stay upright. Sofia didn't look back. She couldn't afford to. For the first time in her life, she wasn't begging Evelyn to understand, wasn't trying to patch over a crack that had been there since childhood. She was finally choosing the truth, even if it meant standing completely alone. And somehow in that terrifying emptiness, she felt stronger than she ever had before. Sofia sat on the edge of the narrow bed long after the confrontation with her mother, staring at the pale patterns on the floral wallpaper until they seemed to crawl. Her body felt weightless and too heavy all at once, her heartbeat a slow, echoing drum in her chest. Evelyn's words, "Then you are no daughter of mine," looped in her head like a cruel lullaby. She glanced at Lucas curled under the quilt with his stuffed fox, his small face soft and peaceful in sleep. Seeing him there made a fresh ache blossom behind her ribs. The weight of everything pressed down the ledgers, the recorder Martin's fraud, Evelyn's blind loyalty. And now this rupture irrevocable, maybe permanent. She didn't realize she'd drifted into a fragile doze until Lucas's scream tore through the dark. "Mom, Mom." Sofia jolted upright. The room was disorientingly dim moonlight slicing in through the sheer curtains, making twisted shadows on the walls. Lucas thrashed under the blanket's fists, beating the mattress, his mouth stretched in a silent wail before the next burst. "Lucas, I'm here, baby." Sofia reached for him, hands fumbling to pull him into her lap. His skin was slick with sweat, his chest rising and falling too fast. Don't let him grab me. I didn't mean it, Mommy. I didn't mean to break it." "Oh, sweetheart." Her voice cracked right down the middle. "It was just a dream. You're safe. Nobody's going to hurt you, I promise." Lucas curled into her sobs, breaking in hiccups. Sofia pressed her lips to his temple, rocking him gently. Her tears fell hot and silent, sliding into his hair. Because in that panicked, guilt-choked plea, "I didn't mean it," she heard herself 8 years old begging behind a locked bathroom door after shattering one of Evelyn's vases, begging her father not to come pounding with his belt. Some traumas repeat themselves even if you swear they won't, she thought bitterly. But this time she tightened her arms around Lucas until he calmed. This time she was here. Eventually his breathing slowed, his fists unclenched, and sleep reclaimed him in twitchy spurts. Sofia didn't dare put him down. She leaned back against the creaky headboard, his weight a grounding anchor, her tears drying on her cheeks. She lay awake the rest of the night, rigid with the sense that every dark corner of the house was holding its breath, listening, waiting. At some hazy hour of dawn, after Lucas had slipped into steady sleep, Sofia eased herself off the bed. She smoothed his hair, tucked the fox tighter under his arm. Then she padded to the old vanity by the window, needing something to busy her hands. The glass was slightly warped, bending her reflection. She didn't recognize herself, skin-pale eyes ringed in bruised circles, the face of a woman who was both terrified and resolved. "Is this who you've become?" "No," she thought with a shiver. "This is who I've always been. I'm just finally not hiding it." A sharp knock splintered the silence. Then, without waiting for permission, the door swung open. Martin filled the frame, big and smug, even in casual slacks and a golf polo. The morning light haloed him unpleasantly, picking out a faint flush on his neck from last night's wine. "Well, look at this," he drawled, eyes flicking lazily over her. "The prodigal cousin, up early plotting more little sabotage projects." Sofia's spine stiffened. Her heart gave a panicked lurch, but she forced her face neutral. "What do you want, Martin?" He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him with a quiet click that sounded like a trap snapping shut. "I came to make sure we're on the same page. Family business is delicate. It requires discretion. That's not exactly your strong suit, is it?" Sofia crossed her arms, leaning back against the vanity so he couldn't maneuver behind her. "If by family business you mean defrauding Grandma and dozens of other elderly people, then no, Martin. I guess discretion doesn't appeal to me." Martin's eyes hardened, his smile flattening. "That's a dangerous attitude, not just for you, but for your boy. You think stirring up scandal is going to give him a better life? Or will it just make sure he never has a trust fund, never has help if he needs it?" Her stomach turned. "Don't talk about Lucas. This has nothing to do with him." "Doesn't it?" Martin cocked his head, his expression suddenly oily. Because from where I'm standing, everything about your life has depended on this family's generosity. Let's take a little stroll down memory lane, shall we? He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a folded paper, flipping it open with casual precision. Ryerson University. Final semester tuition. $8,000. Paid in full by a cashier's check from me after Evelyn came to me in tears about how you were going to drop out. Or have you conveniently forgotten that? Sofia's mouth opened-closed again. Heat flooded her cheeks hot with humiliation. That was a loan. Mom said, "Oh, your mother said a lot of things." Martin waved the paper dismissively. "But here's the reality. You're standing here degree in hand fancy architect title because I covered your ass. You'd have been slinging coffee at some campus cafe if it weren't for me." Sophia swallowed around the bile rising in her throat. "I would have figured it out. I've paid back more than that since." "In what moral superiority?" Martin took a step closer. "Look at you, snapping pictures, pretending you're a crusader. Sophia, you wouldn't last 2 weeks trying to go toe-to-toe with me. The second you take this outside, you open yourself up to scrutiny. They'll drag out every dime this family ever gave you, every old tax favor, every cheap loan. And who's going to protect your little boy when that all comes crashing down?" Her stomach twisted, but something else flared too sharp, bright, defiant. "Are you threatening me?" Martin smirked. "Of course not. I'm simply reminding you of the very real consequences of meddling in matters beyond your comprehension. You see it as theft. I see it as strategic repositioning. Grandma doesn't even know half the funds exist. Those old ladies, they're thrilled to have afternoon bingo and watercolor classes. Meanwhile, I'm securing future returns that'll keep this entire town in our family's shadow for decades. You're gambling with people's security, with Grandma's legacy. Does that mean nothing to you?" Martin's smile faded entirely. For the first time, his eyes went flat cold. "It means everything to me, which is why I won't let some guilt-ridden little girl ruin it. You're not built for this, Sophia. So take my advice, pack up your boy, enjoy your pretty Toronto life, and forget you ever saw those numbers." Then he leaned in so close she could smell the mint masking last night's bourbon. "Or I promise your life will get very complicated, very quickly." Sophia didn't move until he'd finally pulled away, sauntering out with a satisfied nod. The door clicked shut again, that quiet trap resetting. She pressed a shaking hand to her mouth, bile burning the back of her throat. Her mind raced. Martin was right about one thing: if she pushed this, it wouldn't stay tidy. There'd be investigations, media stories, lawyers clawing through family finances. They'd dredge up every favor, every quiet handout. Maybe Lucas would lose the promise of any future inheritance. Maybe he'd even be targeted in uglier ways. But then she looked at her son, still asleep under the quilt, soft and oblivious. And beneath the fear, something unyielding locked into place. She whispered it out loud, voice raw and certain. "I won't let you grow up thinking monsters like him get to win." Sophia wiped her tears on her sleeve, grabbed her phone, and began forwarding every photo to a secure, encrypted drive. Let Martin threaten. Let Evelyn disown her. For the first time in her life, Sophia wasn't going to fold. Not for family, not for comfort, and certainly not for shame. Sophia stood alone in Martin's office, her hands trembling so badly she had to brace them against the edge of the desk to steady herself. Her entire body felt like it was buzzing nerves fired up with equal parts fear and a savage determination. Outside the window, dawn was rising over the backyard, painting the frost-rimmed grass in shades of steel and bone. It was quiet. Too quiet. Now or never, she told herself. She crossed to the desk and flipped open Martin's laptop. The password still worked, ML1980 Stad Glen, and the machine unlocked with a soft chime that made her flinch. The familiar wallpaper popped up a photo of Martin at some smug golf fundraiser trophy in hand, arm around a local city councilman. Her stomach twisted. She navigated straight to the documents folder where she'd found the most damning evidence last time. Her fingers danced over the trackpad, quickly copying every spreadsheet, PDF report, and series of transaction ledgers she could find into a portable drive she'd picked up that morning in town, a last-minute purchase that felt like a lifeline now. The folders loaded agonizingly slow. The little progress bar crawled across the screen while her heart battered against her ribs. Her breath came in shallow gulps, ears straining for any sound of footsteps in the hall. "Please don't let him come back early, please." She glanced over her shoulder every few seconds, sweat prickling under her arms. The walls seemed to tighten around her with every tick of the clock. When the copy finally completed, she yanked the drive free and tucked it into her bra right against her racing heart. She carefully closed the laptop, smoothed the desk exactly how she'd found it, then drew a shaky breath and moved for the door. The hallway beyond was hushed and cool, the house still half asleep in the gray morning light. Sofia walked with slow, deliberate steps, schooling her face into calm. She had almost reached the staircase so close to her room to Lucas sleeping safe under the quilt when a large hand shot out from behind the hallway column and clamped down on her arm like a vice. She let out a small strangled gasp, spinning. Martin stood there, hair still damp from a shower shirt, sleeves rolled neatly to his elbows, his forearm thick and unyielding around her wrist. His face was perfectly composed except for his eyes. Those were dark molten with something savage. "Going somewhere?" he asked, voice a low purr that somehow felt more dangerous than if he'd shouted. "Let me go." Her voice broke embarrassingly on the last word. He squeezed her arm tighter enough to make her flinch. "Not until we have a little understanding. You think I don't know when someone's been digging through my private files?" Sofia tried to yank free, panic spiking hot in her throat. "Martin, you're hurting me!" He leaned in so close she could smell the bitter tang of his aftershave. His breath grazed her cheek, and it took everything in her not to recoil. "I gave you one chance, Sofia. One. To drop this. To walk away and pretend you never found anything. And what do? You double down. You're not just stupid, you're suicidal." His thumb dug painfully into her forearm. Her pulse leaped under his grip. "Let me go." Martin's mouth twisted into a humorless smile. "You know what I realized last night after our little chat? I've been too soft on you. Same as your mother. Always treating you like the delicate disappointment who couldn't hack it in this town, who ran off to Toronto to play at having a life. Maybe we should have cut you loose a long time ago." Sofia's eyes burned. She forced herself to meet his gaze even though her stomach roiled. "You can insult me all you want, but I'm not letting you steal from Grandma, or from all those other people who trusted us." Martin's grip tightened even further, making her gasp. "Careful, Sofia, because I can make it so you and that boy of yours leave here with absolutely nothing. Not a cent. You think you've struggled before? Try paying Toronto rent when your accounts are frozen, your reputation's shot, because I let a few well-placed rumors fly. Maybe I even drop a line to your office about those questionable accounting errors. They won't care if they're made up. Mud sticks. Always does." Sofia's mouth fell open. Her legs felt weak. She could almost see at the apartment eviction notice Lucas's wide, scared eyes, having to pull him from school, the bright dreams of his choir club, his soccer team, all snatched away. Martin leaned closer, breath warm and suffocating. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to take your sweet little boy, you're going to go back to Toronto, and you're going to forget any of this ever existed. Because if you don't," he paused, his thumb brushing her pulse in a mock caress, "I promise I will make your life hell in ways you can't even imagine." Something inside Sofia snapped. Maybe it was the nights she'd spent listening to her son whimper in his sleep, begging imaginary monsters to stop. Maybe it was the decades of watching Evelyn cover up Martin's cruelty, or the memory of her own childhood cowering behind doors. Her voice came out soft but ironclad. "If you were half as smart as you think, you'd have changed your passwords. I already have everything I need." Martin's nostrils flared. His entire face seemed to darken. For a terrifying moment, she thought he might actually strike her. His free hand twitched at his side like he was restraining the urge. But then he shoved her away with a disgusted sound. Sofia stumbled back into the wall, breath heaving. "Fine," he hissed. "Play your little crusader game. But when this all blows up in your face, when you're broke and humiliated, and your kid's wondering why you can't afford to keep the lights on, don't come crying to this family. You're dead to us." She held his gaze, forcing herself not to shrink away, even though her heart was beating so violently she thought it might burst. "That's exactly what Mom said last night. And you know what? I'll take being dead to this family over letting Lucas grow up learning that power excuses everything." Martin's lip curled, but he didn't reply. He simply stepped aside with a sarcastic little flourish of his hand, giving her a clear path down the hall. Sofia didn't hesitate. She walked straight past him, her back rigid, her legs unsteady but moving. As soon as she rounded the corner out of his sight, she pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, swallowing a sob. She wanted to collapse, but she didn't. She hurried back to the room, shut the door quietly, and sagged against it. Her body shook from the adrenaline dump. Lucas stirred under the covers, blinking sleepily. "Mom, shh, baby." She crawled onto the bed and pulled him into her arms, pressing her lips to his hair. Her hand strayed to her chest, feeling the tiny, hard shape of the flash drive hidden in her bra, a lifeline and a time bomb all at once. Sophia closed her eyes, drew a breath that scorched her throat, and made a silent promise. No matter what Martin threatened, no matter how ugly it got, she would not back down. Because this time someone needed to stand up. And she was done waiting for someone else to be brave first. Sophia's pulse thundered in her ears as she stepped back from Martin's path, clutching Lucas's small hand so tightly the boy winced. She didn't loosen her grip, couldn't. Every instinct screamed that if she let go, Martin would be on them in a heartbeat, smothering this tiny, fragile freedom before it ever bloomed. Martin loomed at the end of the hall, blocking the top of the staircase, his arms folded across his chest. The smile that curved his lips was chilling, thin, contemptuous, almost bored. "You're making a spectacle of yourself," he drawled, "dragging the kid into grown-up problems. I thought even you had more sense than that." Lucas pressed closer to Sophia's side, his eyes wide and glassy with fresh tears. "Mommy, can we go home now, please?" Sophia crouched to put herself eye level with him, brushing his hair back from his damp forehead. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to fist them in his curls for a heartbeat to steady them. "Soon, baby. We're leaving. I promise you, okay? I promise." She straightened and tried to move past Martin. He sidestepped, blocking her again. The hall was narrow, claustrophobically so, and it forced her dangerously close to the staircase railing. From this angle, the steps seemed to drop away into nothing. One good push. "Martin, move," she ordered, surprised by how firm her voice sounded. Her legs felt weak, but her tone didn't waver. He laughed under his breath. "Or what, Sophia? You'll sick the law on me, parade Grandma's money around town like some scandal rag. You think this ends with you walking off to your pretty Toronto apartment happily ever after?" His hand shot out, seizing her wrist. Hard, harder than before. A raw gasp tore from her throat. "You're not walking out of here with that drive, Sophia." She tried to wrench free. The motion was violent, desperate. Her shoulder nearly came out of its socket with the force of it. Pain exploded down her arm. Martin's grip only tightened. Lucas began to wail, "Stop it! Stop hurting my mom!" The boy launched himself at Martin's leg, tiny fists pummeling with all the ferocity of an 8-year-old who saw his entire world threatened. The sight both shattered and ignited something in Sophia. Lucas, back up. Martin gave a sharp jerk, yanking Sophia toward him. The movement threw her off balance, her heels slipping on the polished hardwood floor. For a terrifying instant, her center of gravity pitched toward the staircase. Her body tilted into empty space. Lucas let out a strangled shriek, then Martin shoved her shoulder with an impatient grunt. Sophia flailed her hand, catching the banister just in time. Her torso whipped sideways, a bolt of white-hot agony tearing across her ribs. The world spun. For one sickening second, she imagined the fall, her skull splitting on the newel post. Lucas's scream echoing down the hall, Evelyn and Martin standing over her with matching masks of cold disdain. But the banister held. Sophia clung to it with both hands, gasping, her lungs burning for air. Lucas was sobbing in huge, hiccuping gulps. "Mom, Mom!" Martin glowered, his chest heaving. For the first time, his composure cracked. There was a wildness in his eyes that made her stomach flip. He raised a hand as if to grab her again. "Enough!" came a thunderous voice from behind him. Everyone froze. Even Lucas's sobs stuttered into silence. At the top of the opposite staircase, under the shadow of a floral archway, stood Beatrice. Her grandmother looked impossibly frail, thin arms trembling around her carved cane. But her eyes, God, her eyes burned with an authority that could level kingdoms. "Martin Thompson," she barked, her voice hoarse but clear. "Take your hands off my granddaughter, now!" Martin's mouth opened. For once, no words came out. His face turned an ugly mottled red. Slowly, almost sheepishly, he let go of Sophia's wrist. Sophia stumbled back, pulling Lucas against her chest. The boy clung to her, his fingers digging into her waist. Her entire body trembled, the aftershocks of adrenaline still buzzing in her teeth. Beatrice started down the hall. Each tap of her cane against the wood was deafening. "I have spent 80 years in this house," she rasped, glaring at Martin with a disgust that made his shoulders hunch. "And I will not have my legacy reduced to bruises and threats." Martin's jaw clenched. "Grandma, you don't understand." "Be quiet." The old woman didn't raise her voice, but the steel in it was enough to slice him clean. "I may be old, but I am not blind. I've seen what you are becoming, what your mother lets you become, and I will not die knowing I let it fester." Sophia's throat closed. Tears blurred her vision. Lucas's little heartbeat thudded against her chest, fast and scared. Beatrice turned her eyes to Sophia, and some of the frost melted. "Go. Take your boy and go, Sophia. Leave this rotten old house to settle its own debts." "Grandma," Sophia's voice cracked, "I didn't mean for—" "Hush." Beatrice's smile was tiny, tragic. "You were always the only one brave enough to see the truth. Now be brave enough to live away from it." Sofia couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. She nodded, cradling Lucas tighter, then backed down the hall without another word. Martin stood rigid, his hands fisted at his sides, his eyes darting between them and Beatrice with barely restrained fury. When Sofia reached the end of the corridor, she didn't look back. She half-carried Lucas down the stairs, her legs jelly beneath her, terrified that at any moment Martin would come charging after them. But he didn't. The silence behind them was vast and suffocating. Outside, the morning air was sharp and cold on her flushed skin. She didn't slow until they reached her car. Then she collapsed into the driver's seat. Lucas curled in the passenger side, still sobbing. Her hands hovered over the wheel, shaking so violently they made the keys rattle. "Mom," Lucas gulped, air eyes huge and wet. "Why was Uncle Martin so mean? Why did he try to push you?" Sofia sucked in a trembling breath. "Because sometimes people who are supposed to love you the most do the worst things to keep their secrets safe." Lucas wiped his nose on his sleeve. "Are we going to be okay?" Sofia looked at him, truly looked at him, and something steadied in her chest. "Yes, baby. We're going to be more than okay. We're going to be free." She started the car, the engine grumbling awake, and pulled away from that grand decaying house with its haunted hallways and poison memories. As they rolled down the gravel drive, Sofia glanced once in the rearview mirror. On the porch stood Beatrice, her cane planted firm, her white hair tousled by the wind. Watching them leave, eyes shining not with regret, but something almost like relief. Sofia pressed the gas. This was no longer their prison. It was only a house full of shadows. And for the first time in forever, she felt daylight breaking through. Sofia sat in her parked car outside Willow and Birch Cafe, hands resting uselessly on the steering wheel. Her phone buzzed with a new message from Caleb inside corner booth by the window. "Just take your time." She exhaled a shaky breath, her entire body still thrumming with residual adrenaline from the last 24 hours. Martin's threats kept replaying in her head on an ugly loop. "You and that boy of yours will leave here with absolutely nothing." But then she thought of Lucas's tear-streaked face, of how his tiny fists had beaten against Martin's legs when he thought she was going to fall down those stairs. That image ignited something inside her every time it tried to fade. She pushed the car door open and stepped into the crisp morning air. It smelled like wet leaves and espresso, a smell that almost made her knees buckle from the familiarity of better times. She hadn't been in this little town cafe since she was a teenager coming home from summer college, all bright eyes and naive ideas about what family meant. The bell over the door jingled softly as she stepped in. The place was mostly empty, save for a gray-haired couple nursing mugs and a young mother balancing a baby on her knee. At the far corner, tucked into a booth half shaded by a hanging fern, sat Caleb. He rose the instant he saw her, a polite smile breaking across his youthful face. Caleb couldn't have been older than 30, though the dark suit and carefully combed hair tried to age him. His tie was slightly crooked, something that somehow made Sofia's heart squeeze in relief. Imperfect. Human. Not like Martin, who'd always seemed too polished, too cold. "Sofia," he said, extending a hand. His voice was lower than she expected, steady, almost gentle. "Caleb Price, thanks for trusting me with this." She took his hand. His grip was firm but not crushing. For the first time in days, she felt like maybe she wasn't alone in the storm. "Thanks for meeting me on such short notice," she managed, sliding into the booth across from him. Caleb waved it off. "Elder financial abuse is something my office takes seriously. Especially around here, it's a lot more common in these small communities than people realize. I've read over the preliminary emails you sent. Do you have the physical evidence with you?" Wordlessly, Sofia dug the flash drive from her bag, hands trembling slightly. She set it on the table between them. Caleb glanced at it like it was radioactive, then gave her a small, grim nod before tucking it into his inside jacket pocket. "I'll run secure backups today. Don't worry, none of this will leak prematurely. But I'm going to be honest with you, Sofia. What you're alleging, it's not just some family spat. It's major. If your uncle's been using a charitable elder trust as a private piggy bank, that's fraud at best. If residents suffered harm, missed care medications delayed because funds were missing, it could rise to criminal elder abuse. He could be facing serious charges." Sofia pressed her palm flat on the tabletop, willing it to stop vibrating. That's what I want. I want it all out. I want Grandma's friends protected, and I want him stopped before he does this to anyone else. Caleb studied her for a long beat. "That's very brave, but also very hard. If you choose to move forward, you become the primary cooperating witness. You'll be questioned, maybe even deposed formally by his attorneys if this goes to trial. They will try to smear you, make it look like a family vendetta." Sofia laughed softly, though it was more a ragged exhale. It is a family vendetta, but for the right reasons. Caleb's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Fair. And look, I'm not saying this to scare you. I just want you prepared. Your uncle's going to be ruthless. He'll try to hush it up quietly. Maybe even paint you as unstable. Can you handle that? Sofia thought of Lucas again, clutching her around the waist, begging her to make it stop. Her chest burned. Yes, I can handle it, as long as I'm protecting my son from ever thinking this is how family should work. Caleb leaned forward, lowering his voice. The good news is we have options. If you're willing to sign authorization today, I can initiate a private forensic audit through the county's Elder Protection Task Force. That freezes any suspicious movement on the trust while we investigate. Simultaneously, I can start drafting civil protective actions to secure the remaining assets. If criminal wrongdoing is confirmed, the DA will step in. Your uncle could be indicted. Something inside her gave a sharp twist at the word indicted. This was all so real. Not just tense dinners or whispered scoldings behind closed doors. Prison. A record. Martin wouldn't just be the boorish family bully anymore, he'd be publicly exposed. And the resident's grandma Sofia asked her throat tight. If we freeze the funds now, we can protect what's left and make sure any future payments prioritize resident care. Your grandmother's living expenses would be secure. The law is on your side here. Elder financial exploitation is taken very seriously in Ontario, especially if it crosses into healthcare funding. Sofia blinked hard. Tears threatened to spill over. Caleb didn't look away, didn't rush her. You okay? He asked after a moment, voice careful. She gave a wobbly nod. Just, nobody's ever taken my side against them before. Not really. It's like I've been screaming into a hurricane my whole life and suddenly someone hears it. Caleb's eyes softened. You're heard now, loud and clear. And more importantly, so are all those residents who've probably been wondering why art classes are canceled or outings cut back without explanation. You're not just protecting your family, you're protecting a whole community. She swallowed again, reached into her bag, and pulled out the manila envelope he'd asked her to bring. Inside was her signed declaration copies of the photos and her formal consent to act as cooperating witness. Caleb reviewed each page carefully, his pen scratching out quick initials. Finally, he laid the last sheet flat before her. This is the engagement agreement. It authorizes me, and if necessary, our associated investigators to act on your behalf. Once you sign, we start today. No more warnings. No more Martin pulling puppet strings behind closed doors. Sofia stared at the pen he offered. Her fingers hovered, her hand shook. Then with a small exhale that seemed to pull every splinter out of her chest, she signed her name. It was sloppy, slightly crooked, but it was hers. Her final act of severing the old sick loyalties that had poisoned them all. Caleb clicked the pen shut. Welcome to the fight, Sofia. A watery laugh escaped her. God, that makes it sound like I just joined the Avengers. In a way you did. His grin was quick, boyish. The people who quietly stand up to corruption in their own families, they're the real superheroes. Trust me, I see a lot of the opposite in my line of work. Her eyes burned again, but with something cleaner than grief. It almost felt like hope. They stood Caleb tucking everything into his leather satchel with meticulous care. He gave her shoulder a reassuring squeeze before they left the cafe, the morning sun now pouring across the street in bright, promise-soaked beams. Outside, Sofia drew in a long breath. She glanced down at her phone, already buzzing with new texts, likely from Evelyn, maybe Martin, no doubt full of threats or manipulations. She silenced it, slid it into her pocket. Because for the first time, her next steps weren't going to be dictated by fear or old loyalties. They were going to be guided by the promise she made to Lucas in the dark. No more monsters hiding behind family portraits. And standing there on that bustling little sidewalk, she finally felt ready to keep it. Sofia sat at the tiny oak kitchen table in her Toronto apartment, her hands wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold. Outside the window, a late afternoon drizzle streaked down the glass, blurring the skyline into smudges of gray and steel. It was oddly comforting. Toronto rain always had a way of quieting her mind, pressing pause on the racing worries. Across from her, Caleb methodically arranged his files. He and the private investigator Diane, a wiry woman with blunt-cut gray hair and a shrewd glint in her eyes, had set up shop here for the afternoon, turning Sofia's modest kitchen into a war room. Papers were fanned out across every surface. Laptops hummed softly. A portable scanner whirred every few minutes. We pulled the transaction logs directly from the bank's compliance office, Diane said, tapping a sheet covered in lines of numbers and red annotations. They flagged Martin's transfers months ago under their internal review process. It never got escalated because the amounts were consistently just under the reporting thresholds. Classic structuring. Caleb nodded grimly. He's clever, moves money in thin streams just wide enough to fly under mandatory disclosure, but altogether it's hundreds of thousands bleeding out of that trust. And the security footage from Northern Bank Sofia asked, her voice tight. Diane's eyes sparkled with something sharp. Already subpoenaed. Should be delivered by tomorrow morning. We know the dates of the largest withdrawals. Now we'll have him on camera taking out cash, then depositing to his brokerage. It's an old playbook, but people like Martin never think it'll circle back to them. Not in small towns where they golf with the branch managers. Sofia let out a long, shaking breath. Her stomach flipped at the thought of Martin swaggering into those marble-floored lobbies, flashing his perfect smile at tellers who probably had no clue they were handing him stolen futures. She pressed a palm to her chest. Her heart was still tender from too many nights of fear. What if he found out how deep this investigation ran before it was too late to stop him? Caleb seemed to read her thoughts. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Hey, this is the hard part, the waiting, the building the case brick by brick. But we're doing it right. By the book, by the numbers. So when this goes public, there's nothing he can spin. The facts will stand on their own. Sofia nodded mutely. Her throat felt too thick to speak. Instead, she squeezed his hand in thanks. A quiet rustle from the living room broke the moment. Lucas was sprawled on the carpet markers scattered everywhere. He'd bent over a big piece of construction paper. He'd been humming off and on for the past hour, small content sounds that drifted through the apartment like little lights. Sofia stood and walked over, easing down beside him. Hey, kiddo, what are you working on there? Lucas beamed up at her, his face smudged with yellow marker. It's a picture for you, Mommy, and for Grandma, too, when she feels better. Her heart twisted. He still didn't fully understand the storm swirling around them. To Lucas' family was simple people. You loved people who should love you back. Not pawns in financial schemes or enablers of cruel secrets. She settled cross-legged on the carpet. Can I see? Lucas carefully turned the paper toward her. The drawing was crowded and bright, full of lopsided stick figures under a big sun. See, that's you, he said, pointing to a woman with long dark hair holding a tiny hand. And that's me. We're smiling because we're going to go get ice cream. Her eyes pricked. She bit her lip to keep it together. I love that. Lucas's finger moved. That's great-grandma. She's sitting on her porch with her flowers. And that's Uncle Martin. Sofia's breath hitched. The stick figure labeled Martin had a scowl drawn in thick red lines. More striking, though, was the lumpy black shape dangling from one hand. It looked like a sack. Lucas had even drawn tiny lines around it, maybe meant to be stink marks or some kind of cartoon evil aura. And what's that he's holding? Sofia asked, her voice strangely thin. Lucas shrugged, unbothered. It's his sneaky money bag. Like in the movies. Bad guys always have a bag of money, right? So I put it there so you can tell he's bad. A laugh escaped her, a raw, startled sound. It cracked, broke, then dissolved into tears before she could stop it. Lucas's eyes widened. Mommy, are you mad? Oh no, baby. She pulled him into her arms, pressing her cheek to the top of his head. Not mad, just really happy you see things so clear. You're such a smart boy. He squirmed with shy pride. So you like my picture? I love it, she whispered, her throat closing around the words. I'm going to keep it forever. Later, after Diane packed up her case files and Caleb promised updates the next morning, Sofia lingered by the front door. They stood together in the hall, a quiet hush falling between them. You know, Caleb said, scratching the back of his neck, most cases I handle like this, it's kids trying to get control over aging parents' estates for selfish reasons, or siblings fighting over inheritance scraps. It's rare, really rare, to see someone putting themselves through hell just to protect a grandparent and a bunch of other residents. Sofia managed a small smile. Guess I'm just stubborn. Or maybe I finally learned the right things to be stubborn about. Caleb's grin flickered softer. Whatever it is, it's brave. And it's going to mean everything to those people. He squeezed her shoulder firm, warm. Then he and Diane disappeared into the stairwell, their footsteps fading. That evening, after Lucas fell asleep on the couch in a nest of blankets, Sofia took the drawing to the kitchen. She smoothed it across the table under the light. Her fingertips traced each marker line. Her smiling stick figure, Lucas's Beatrice with flowers, Martin with his ominous little money bag. She laughed again, wetly, dabbing at her eyes. Maybe one day she'd explain it all to Lucas, how he saw something so obvious that generations of adults in her family had refused to. How sometimes the bravest people were the ones who didn't even know they were being brave, just honest. She taped the drawing to the fridge right next to Lucas's old construction paper turkey from last Thanksgiving. It looked almost absurd there, bright and damning in its childish clarity, but it was perfect, a tiny, perfect truth. Then Sofia sank into a chair, resting her head in her hands. For the first time since leaving that decaying house, she allowed herself to feel it fully, not fear, not adrenaline, just a deep, exhausted kind of relief. Because she wasn't alone anymore. Caleb and Diane were building a fortress of facts and cold, hard law around her. Lucas was her lighthouse, bright and guileless, guiding her back whenever she started to sink. And Beatrice's voice still echoed in her mind, "Leave this rotten old house to settle its own debts." She would. And when it was over, she'd build something new for Lucas, something honest no matter how small. Sofia exhaled, slow and shaky. Her gaze lifted to the fridge again, to that cartoon Martin with his black bag. Her laughter broke the silence once more, tired but real. And just like that, under a dim Toronto kitchen lamp, she realized the future was already beginning to look different. Martin was halfway down the front staircase, phone pressed so tight to his ear his knuckles blanched when the 3 squad cars rolled to a stop outside the big iron gate. Their blue and red lights painted grotesque stripes across the cream columns of the old house. It was an oddly beautiful afternoon, sunlight gold on the manicured hedges, a few maple leaves fluttering lazily in the warm breeze. A day that should have been meant for tea on the porch, polite gossip, old stories. Not this. Sofia stood frozen by the parlor archway, one hand gripping Lucas's shoulder. She could feel the boy trembling under her palm, even though he didn't fully understand yet what was unfolding. The knock at the door was polite, almost absurdly so. Then came the second, harder, more official. One of the house staff answered. A cluster of uniformed officers and 2 men in dark suits stepped inside, flashing badges. The lead detective, a tall, severe man with iron-gray hair, surveyed the entry hall with a cool, clinical eye. "Martin Thompson," he called, voice echoing up the high ceilings. Martin turned on the stairs, his face contorted through a series of expressions, irritation, surprise, something close to outrage, before finally settling on a forced calm. "Can I help you?" "Detective Roy, this is Investigator Dale from the Office of Elder Financial Protection." Roy held up a sheaf of papers. "We have a warrant to seize all accounting documents related to the Thompson Family Enrichment Trust, as well as personal and business banking records." And he added, as 2 uniformed officers flanked the staircase, "Mr. Thompson, we're placing you under investigative detention pending further questioning." For half a beat, it was utterly silent. And then Martin let out a bark of laughter that skidded up into something shrill. "Are you people serious? This is my family's private residence. You have no right barging in here." "Under Ontario law," Investigator Dale cut in calmly, "we absolutely do, Mr. Thompson. We have multiple affidavits supporting bank records and preliminary audit flags that suggest misuse of charitable funds intended for elder care. You'll have the opportunity to answer questions downtown." Martin's face went the color of old clay. He clutched the banister so hard the wood creaked. His eyes darted wildly to the uniformed men spreading out across the hall, to Evelyn, emerging from the side salon, one hand to her throat. Then they found Sofia. He pointed at her, his voice cracking. You did this, you ungrateful little snake, selling out your own blood to outsiders. How could you?" Sofia's chest constricted. For a breath, she almost faltered. Because it was true, she'd destroyed the Thompson family's long, polished surface, shattered the illusion of unity they'd all clung to. But then Lucas pressed closer to her side, his small hand wrapping around hers, and every scrap of doubt evaporated. She lifted her chin. "No, Martin, you did this. With every dollar you stole from people who trusted you. With every lie you fed us so we'd stay quiet." Martin's mouth worked, trying to shape some fresh insult or threat, but nothing came out. His eyes glittered with raw, unvarnished hate. Evelyn finally seemed to register what was happening. She staggered forward, the pearls at her throat trembling with each heaving breath. Wait, there must be a mistake. Martin's always managed the trust. His grandfather set it up. He's been keeping it healthy for years. You can't just drag him away like some common criminal." Detective Roy's gaze softened by a fraction, but his tone didn't. "Ma'am, we understand this is difficult, but we have substantial cause. We'd appreciate it if you'd remain seated while we complete the search." One of the officers gently steered Evelyn toward a chaise. Her knees buckled before she even reached it. She collapsed, skirts pooling around her, a hand pressed over her mouth. Martin tried one last surge, shoulders squaring, jaw thrust out. "I'll have your badges for this. My attorneys will shred whatever garbage affidavits you think you have." "That's your right to pursue in court," Dale said, nodding calmly. Then he signaled, and the 2 nearest officers stepped up. The click of handcuffs was horribly loud in the cavernous hall. Martin flinched as the cold steel bit into his wrists. For a fleeting moment, he looked almost small, just a middle-aged man in an overpriced suit panicking. "Jesus Christ, get your hands off me!" The officers guided him down the last few stairs. Martin twisted, casting around for any last foothold, any ally. His gaze landed on Evelyn. "Mother, say something. Stop them. Tell them this is all lies. Tell them Sofia's always been unstable. Evelyn didn't move. Her eyes were huge, blank with shock. Her hand slipped from her throat, falling limp into her lap. When she finally looked at Martin, it was with a kind of hollow devastation Sofia had never seen on her mother's face before. The front doors opened again. Light spilled in, bright and almost cruel in its contrast. Outside, Sofia could see more officers at their cars talking into radios. Neighbors stood clustered at the gate, hands over mouths. A couple even lifted their phones recording. Martin twisted once more, aiming all his fury at Sofia. His voice cracked shrill and raw. "You'll regret this. You think the world will take your side over family blood doesn't wash away Sofia. You remember that." She held his stare even when it felt like her heart might seize in her chest. Blood might not wash away, but guilt does when you finally decide to tell the truth. Martin barked a humorless laugh, shoulders jerking in disbelief. Then the officers led him across the threshold, his head ducked, eyes darting left and right as though expecting a last-minute reprieve. Silence flooded the hall. Evelyn still sat crumpled on the floor, her breathing shallow and uneven. Sofia almost stepped forward, instinct, urging her to comfort, to soothe old habits dug deep. But then she felt Lucas's small hand tighten on hers. She looked down at him. His eyes were wide but calm, searching her face for how to feel. So she knelt, drawing him close. "It's over now, sweetheart. They can't hurt us or Grandma's friends ever again." Lucas pressed his cheek to her shoulder, nodding into her sweater. Somewhere deeper in the house, drawers were opening and closing, investigators murmuring to each other as they cataloged files, copied hard drives. The sounds rose and fell, a strange mechanical ballet Sofia barely registered. Because for the first time in decades, the Thompson family home felt honest. Not warm, not safe, but honest. The lies had been dragged out into the sun, their power finally stripped away. Evelyn let out a tiny sob, her shoulders shaking. She didn't look up. Sofia stood her arm around Lucas's shoulders, and together they moved toward the foyer, toward the open door and the light beyond. It was done, and even though the aftermath would be messy and long lawyers' public statements, maybe even more court appearances, this moment was theirs, a line in the sand that couldn't be uncrossed. Lucas looked up at her as they stepped out into the bright air. "Are we going home now?" Sofia exhaled a shudder that felt like shedding 1,000 pounds. "Yeah, baby," she whispered, "we're going home." Sofia found herself standing once again in the long, dim corridor upstairs just outside her grandmother's bedroom. The low murmur of investigators still drifted up from the foyer, mixed with the hollow thud of drawers being opened and closed, the crinkle of paper evidence bags. Even from here, she could feel the energy in the house had shifted, like someone had lifted the grand old rugs and exposed all the rot beneath. Lucas was with one of the younger officers in the sitting room, coloring quietly. The woman had offered him juice and gently distracted him with cartoons on her phone, giving Sofia space she hadn't known she needed this badly. She stepped into the bedroom. The heavy drapes were half drawn, but late sun still pushed through in dusty columns, lighting up the age spots on Beatrice's thin hands where they lay atop the quilt. Her grandmother looked impossibly small in the ornate bed, the once imposing headboard towering above her frail frame. Grandma Sofia's voice cracked. Beatrice turned her head, eyes fluttering open. When she saw Sofia, her lips curved into the barest ghost of a smile. She beckoned weakly with her fingers. Sofia crossed the room in 3 quick steps and sank onto the edge of the mattress. The old woman's hand felt papery and cold in hers, the veins like delicate blue threads. "It's all right," Beatrice rasped, her breath catching painfully. "You did what I should have done a long, long time ago." Tears threatened immediately. Sofia squeezed her grandmother's hand, bowing her head. Please don't put this on yourself. It's Martin's doing his choices, his greed." But Beatrice shook her head, a tiny, stubborn tremor. "No, sweetheart. A boy doesn't learn to believe he can take whatever he wants without someone teaching him. I let your grandfather raise Martin harsh, thinking it would make him strong. When your grandfather passed, I let your mother keep coddling him, letting him grow cruel instead of kind. And I stood by. I told myself families survive by smoothing over cracks, keeping private things private." Her eyes glossed with tears that slid slow and warm into her hairline. But all it did was feed the rot. Sofia felt something shatter loose inside her chest. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to Beatrice's. "It's not too late. You see it now, Grandma. That matters. That's more than Mom ever tried to see. Beatrice let out a soft, broken sigh. I'm so sorry, Sofia. I'm sorry for every night you lay awake scared in this house, for every time you thought your voice was too loud, your questions too much. I should have loved you better, loved you loud enough to drown out their judgments. Sofia sobbed a single jagged breath. Her shoulders shook with it. I always loved you, Grandma. Even when I ran, I couldn't live like this anymore. Beatrice cupped her cheek with frail fingers, brushing away tears. Good. You saved yourself. And your boy. That's the only redemption this family will ever earn because of you. Sofia couldn't speak. She kissed her grandmother's knuckles and just held on, letting years of tension and guilt bleed out in silent sobs. The door cracked open behind them. Evelyn stood framed there still in her elegant silk blouse from earlier, now rumpled, the pearl buttons askew. Her face was drawn and pinched eyes rimmed in red, but there was no softness in her expression, only a deep, rattling hurt that sharpened into blame the instant she met Sofia's eyes. So this is what it comes to, Evelyn said, voice low and brittle. You've destroyed this family. Your own brother's name in the gutter, our legacy in ruins. What kind of daughter does this? Sofia inhaled slowly, wiping at her cheeks before she looked up. The tremble was gone from her hands. Her pulse was steady. The kind who refuses to keep covering up other people's crimes. The kind who won't let her child grow up thinking silence is love. Evelyn's lip curled almost a sneer. And what will Lucas have, A mother who turned on her own blood? A family torn apart because you couldn't keep your grievances quiet like everyone else? Family isn't ruined by the truth, Mother Sofia said. Her voice was so calm it startled even her. It's ruined by hiding the truth until it becomes poison. You and Martin spent your lives pretending we were all fine, that he was just a little harsh, that money missing was necessary. And look where it got us. Look where it got Grandma. Beatrice made a small, pained sound. Evelyn glanced at her mother, her jaw tightening. You always did like to play the martyr, Sofia. Always chasing some moral high ground to make up for your own failures. Sofia shook her head. I chased nothing. I tried to live quietly, keep my distance, keep Lucas safe. You were the ones who kept pulling us back. And when Lucas became the target, when Martin grabbed him, terrified him, I decided enough was enough. Evelyn swayed slightly where she stood, one hand braced on the doorframe. Her lips parted like she might spit out another retort, but no words came. Instead, she looked around the room at her frail mother, at the open window that let in the sound of police radios crackling on the lawn. Her eyes turned glassy. This family is all I ever had, she whispered. It was so quiet Sofia barely heard it. I held it together for decades. Smiled at parties, covered Martin's debts, made sure you had tuition even when your father said you didn't deserve it. And you repay me by destroying us in front of the whole town. Sofia's throat tightened. You didn't hold a family together, Mom. You held together a lie. And I'm sorry that truth hurts, but I'm not sorry for telling it. For a long moment, Evelyn just stared at her. Then her shoulders slumped, her gaze dropping to the floor, like the fight had drained out of her. Without another word, she turned and walked out, footsteps hollow in the corridor. Sofia sat there for a long time, Beatrice's hand still locked in hers. The room was thick with the kind of quiet that came after earthquakes, where everything looked the same on the surface, but you knew foundations had cracked far below. Finally, her grandmother sighed. She'll never understand, will she? Sofia shook her head, brushing a tear off Beatrice's cheek. No, but maybe Lucas will, and maybe that's enough. Beatrice squeezed her hand with surprising strength. You make sure that boy knows the power of his own voice, Sofia. Don't ever let him be cowed by people who mistake cruelty for authority. I promise, Sofia whispered. Her voice was raw but steady. She stayed there until her grandmother's breathing evened out, her frail chest rising and falling in a fragile rhythm. Outside, the sun dipped lower, turning the windows gold-lighting dust motes that danced like tiny spirits. When Sofia finally stood to leave, she bent and pressed her lips to Beatrice's temple. I love you, Grandma. Thank you for seeing me, even if it took all this time. The old woman's eyes fluttered open, bright with tears and something like peace. Thank you for making me see. Now go take your son home. Build him something better than we ever did. So Sofia did. She stepped out of the room with her head high, her heart cracked but open, and her future at last untangled from all those poisonous roots. The indictment dropped on a rainy Wednesday morning. Sofia learned about it first from an insistent buzz on her phone, 3 missed calls from Caleb followed by a single-line text. It's official. Martin's being formally charged. Press conference at noon. I'll keep you updated. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at the screen, her heart a tight knot in her chest. It wasn't joy exactly. more like a profound, almost weary relief, like finally seeing the dam burst after years of hairline fractures spidering across its surface. Later that afternoon, Lucas was at a playdate, blissfully oblivious, so Sofia allowed herself to stand in front of the living room TV, volume low, but eyes riveted to the small local news station's live feed. The camera trembled slightly in the breeze focused on the courthouse steps downtown, where Detective Roy gave a short, sober statement. Evidence compiled by both the Financial Crimes Division and the Elder Protection Task Force indicates extensive misappropriation of charitable trust funds intended for the support of seniors in our community. Mr. Martin Thompson will be arraigned later this week on multiple counts of fraud and criminal breach of trust, including aggravated charges given the vulnerable population involved. Sofia didn't realize she was holding her breath until her lungs burned. She let it out in a slow, shaky exhale. Then she covered her mouth with her hand and simply stood there alone in her small apartment, watching a man she'd grown up both fearing and pitying become a headline. News of Martin's downfall spread through their hometown with all the subtlety of wildfire. It leaped from grocery store checkout lines to church pews to the back tables of the local diner, carried on whispers that grew sharper and more knowing with each retelling. The same people who once eagerly accepted Martin's holiday contributions, quiet donations slipped into community raffles, extra sponsorships for local sports teams, new hymnals for the church now pretended not to know him. They averted their eyes in the street crossed to the opposite sidewalk if they spotted him coming out of his lawyer's office. Those carefully groomed alliances he'd spent years cultivating with weekend golf trips and fat checks dried up almost overnight. Sofia received text after text from old classmates and family acquaintances, most thinly veiled attempts to sniff out scandal. Wow, I had no idea it was that bad. How are you holding up? Or worse, from people who framed it as gossip candy. He always did think he was untouchable. Huh, guess he found out. She answered none of them. Because this was never about gloating. It was about stopping something that had quietly hurt so many for so long. Still, there was a bittersweet edge to watching the very social machine Martin had once used to elevate himself now pivot, as if by instinct to protect its own reputation. Meanwhile, the rippled effects of the indictment were felt in tangible, urgent ways. The county judge who issued the freezing order on the Thompson Family Enrichment Trust also appointed an independent financial steward, someone who immediately began restoring the siphoned funds back to their intended beneficiaries. Within a month, the local elder care center, Bright Hollow, saw donations resurface. Necessary building repairs resumed. A stalled order of new hospital-grade mattresses finally arrived. Beatrice was moved into a newly renovated wing with fresh paint, wide, sunny windows, and a round-the-clock nurse whose competence and gentle humor made the old woman smile for the first time in ages. Sofia visited nearly every afternoon. She'd bring Lucas on weekends, and together they'd fill the sterile room with laughter and the scratchy sound of Lucas's pencil sketches. He'd grown fond of drawing his great-grandmother nestled among enormous cartoon flowers, or holding hands with cartoon versions of him and Sofia, pictures that Beatrice taped proudly to her wall, crowding out sterile prints of local landscapes. One afternoon, the director of Bright Hollow, a soft-spoken man named Mr. Patel, pulled Sofia aside just outside Beatrice's room. "You know," he said, voice low, "your decision to come forward saved this place. We were weeks away from cutting staff again. Residents were already seeing fewer activity coordinators, fewer off-site outings, smaller meal budgets. The restoration of that trust didn't just help your grandmother. It helped every senior who calls this their home." Sofia blinked back sudden tears. "Thank you for saying that. It's easy to wonder if I did the right thing, watching my mother look at me like a traitor." Patel's smile was small but warm. "Your mother loved her family's illusion. You chose their reality. That's harder but infinitely more honorable." At night, Sofia would lie in bed and replay these conversations, trying to stitch them together into something that felt like healing. Some days it almost worked. Other days it still felt like everything around her was made of thin, bruised glass. Lucas helped. Every time he flung himself onto the couch after school, backpack thudding to the floor, eyes alight to show her the day's new drawing or story, she was reminded exactly why she'd done all of this. One evening he padded over while she sorted through a small mountain of mail. He tucked himself into her side, held up a fresh drawing done in neon crayon. "It's us," he explained brightly. "Going on an airplane to maybe somewhere with a beach. You're smiling big, not like scared smiling like at Grandma's house." Her throat tightened. "That's beautiful, Lucas. Where are we going in your picture?" "Somewhere we don't gotta whisper, where nobody ever makes you cry." Sofia swallowed around the knot in her chest. She hugged him close, breathing in the scent of crayons and soap and sunshine that seemed permanently woven into his hair. Yeah, baby, that sounds perfect. Meanwhile, back in their hometown, Martin's attorneys scrambled to mount a defense. Local papers ran speculative headlines about whether he'd try to negotiate a plea deal or let it drag out in court. Evelyn largely vanished from view, retreating into the big empty house that was now more mausoleum than manor. Sofia heard through old neighbors that Evelyn still hosted her little afternoon teas, only now the guest list was whittled to the truly shameless or truly desperate. Even they seemed to edge away once it became clear there'd be no more discreet envelopes of cash at Christmas time. Ironically, it was the same social hunger that had once made Martin so powerful, his desire to buy loyalty with gala tables and donation plaques, that left him isolated now. No one wanted the stench of fraud on their good name. One evening just before dusk, Sofia sat alone on her small balcony overlooking the narrow Toronto street. She cradled a mug of tea gone cold, eyes half closed, listening to the faint hum of life all around her, neighbors laughing somewhere down the block, a bicycle bell, someone practicing piano. Her phone buzzed. A short text from Caleb, formal sentencing hearing set for 3 weeks. I'll be there. Want me to keep you updated? Sofia exhaled a slow, grateful breath. Yes, please. She set the phone down, then tilted her face toward the darkening sky. A single star pricked through the bruised blue. In that moment, for reasons she couldn't fully name, she felt it quiet, fragile but real. The beginning of something like peace. Because the town could gossip, the family could fracture, the papers could speculate. But the truth was finally rooted in the open, undeniable, like steel driven into the earth. Martin was facing consequences, not just whispered rebukes at parties. The people he stole from would be made whole. Her grandmother would live out her remaining days with dignity, surrounded by the laughter of new friends in sunlit hallways. And Lucas would grow up learning that love didn't mean silence, that real family didn't demand you hide your scars to keep its comfort. For the first time, Sofia let herself believe that might be enough, and on that cool Toronto evening she felt her breath steady in a way it hadn't in years, like maybe her lungs were finally free to take in the full shape of hope. The bus rumbled low under their feet wheels, humming a steady hypnotic rhythm as it cut through the last stretch of open Ontario highway. Outside, the wide windows, farmland rolled by in muted colors, dusty greens, pale golds, the occasional patch of early autumn flame. Lucas had fallen into a quiet spell about half an hour ago, his small body curled sideways in the seat so that his cheek rested against Sofia's arm. She could feel the way he was still awake by the slight tension in his shoulder and the tiny, absent fidgets of his fingers pressing and releasing against her sleeve. Every so often he'd shift and sigh or peek through the window at a distant silo. Sofia ran her palm through his hair again and again, hoping it might settle whatever new questions were stirring inside his mind. Because there would always be more questions now, wouldn't there? That was the cost of truth. You never went back to the neat illusions of childhood. You learned that monsters didn't hide under your bed. They often sat across from you at holiday dinners. The bus hit a small bump. Lucas lifted his head, blinking, and turned his eyes up to her. They were still swollen a little from all the tears of the past week. Mom, he asked softly. Yeah, baby? His brow scrunched. If Uncle Martin goes to jail, and Grandma Evelyn doesn't talk to us anymore, does that mean we're not a family now? The question landed so squarely in the hollow of her chest that Sofia almost lost her breath. She pressed her lips together, tasted salt from where tears had dried earlier. Her first instinct was to scramble for something quick and gentle to say, "Of course we're still family, sweetie. Don't be silly." But she stopped herself. Lucas deserved more than the neat half-truths she'd been raised on. He deserved the actual shape of it, messy and complicated. She tightened her grip on his hand instead, threading her fingers through his smaller ones, warm and slightly sticky from the carton of apple juice he'd finished earlier. "Look at me, Lucas." He did. His eyes were wide, solemn, carrying more fear and hope than any child should have to shoulder. "Family," Sofia began carefully, her voice low so it wouldn't shake. "Family isn't just the people we share blood with. It's not about who looks like us or who says they're related. Family is the people we love so much that we want to keep them safe even when it's hard. The people who love us back the same way." Lucas's lips parted. He swallowed, processing. "So, we're still a family even if it's just me and you." She squeezed his hand so tight it made both of them giggle a little. "Especially because it's me and you. You're my heart, Lucas. You always will be. And as long as we have each other no matter what anyone else does or says, that's family. That's the truest kind. His small shoulders relaxed. He leaned sideways again, snuggling back into her ribs. When he spoke, his voice was drowsy but more peaceful. Okay, I like that kind of family better anyway. Sofia kissed the top of his head, breathing in the warm, familiar smell of him. She let her lips linger there, eyes closing. The city began to announce itself gradually, first with the wide, glittering sweep of an industrial park, then with billboards, then with the slow press of traffic funneling them toward the dense heart of Toronto. The noise picked up more horns, more shouts, the vibration of bass from passing cars. Lucas's eyes lit up, his earlier seriousness forgotten, as he craned to see out the window. "There's that big building we always pass," he exclaimed, pointing to the sleek glass arc of a downtown office tower. "And look, there's the playground by your work." She nodded, ruffling his hair. "Almost home." That word tasted different now. It wasn't just an address on a lease or a place she tried to keep tidy so no one would whisper. It was hers. Theirs, untangled from the suffocating expectations of her mother, the sly manipulations of Martin. For the first time, Sofia could imagine building something purely around love and safety, around Lucas's bright laugh and his fearless, boundless questions. They reached their stop just before the dinner rush choked the streets completely. Sofia stepped down first, then helped Lucas with his backpack, guiding him by the shoulder as they navigated the busy sidewalk. Car horns blared. A bike courier zipped by so fast her coat fluttered. Lucas bounced beside her, pointing at a street musician playing violin near the subway stairs. "Can we give him something, Mom?" She paused, rummaging in her purse until she found a couple of loonies. Lucas took them and ran over to drop them in the open case, earning a broad grin and an extra flourish of the song. When he trotted back, Sofia caught his hand again. "Thank you for being so kind, sweetheart." Lucas shrugged, bashful. He was making everybody smile. That's important. Sofia swallowed hard. She wanted to say, "You're going to be such a good man someday," but something about that felt like it tied his worth to growing up, when really he was already enough right here, right now. So instead she said, "It is. It really is." They stopped by their usual corner bakery, the scent of warm bread and cinnamon buns wrapping around them like a familiar hug. Lucas picked out a chocolate croissant. Sofia settled on a simple rosemary roll. By the time they reached their building, the sky had shifted to that soft, aching blue of early evening, and lights began blinking on in all the apartment windows, tiny snapshots of lives continuing ordinary and extraordinary all at once. Inside, Lucas dropped his backpack with a sigh of relief and ran straight to the fridge to slap up a new drawing. Sofia laughed as she shrugged off her coat, watching him smooth the tape tongue poking out the side of his mouth in concentration. When he finished, he stepped back proudly. "See, it's you and me. And a dog, maybe someday." She studied the stick figures under the bright sun he'd drawn in the corner. There was no dark money bag in anyone's hands, no looming mansion or stiff-backed matriarch, just two people, messy-haired, holding hands, smiling. "Maybe someday," Sofia agreed, voice thick. Then she pulled him into a hug so tight he squeaked. That night, long after Lucas drifted to sleep sprawled across his tangle of sheets and stuffed animals, Sofia stood by the window of their tiny living room, a mug of tea warming her palms. She watched cars crawl past on the street below, neon signs blink. Someone laughed too loud outside a late cafe. It was all so beautifully alive, messy, unpredictable, but honest. Her phone buzzed again. Caleb, this time with a short line. Martin's next hearing moved up. "DA says it's looking open and shut. You were brave, Sofia." She typed back, "Not brave, just done being quiet." Then she set her phone down and let the city sounds pour in. Lucas shifted in bed, muttering in his sleep. Sofia smiled. She pressed her forehead to the cool window glass, let out a long breath, and felt something inside her settle. Family wasn't a name on a deed or a chair saved at a dinner table. It was the chance to stand together, to protect each other, to choose love again and again, even when it was hard. And she was going to make damn sure Lucas never had to wonder about that the way she once did. The elementary school auditorium was packed. Families pressed shoulder to shoulder on rows of narrow wooden chairs. Phones held high little kids squirming in parents' laps. The air buzzed with chatter and the faint burnt sugar scent of the cotton candy machine someone had wheeled in for after the show. Sofia sat dead center in the third row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, heart thrumming a wild rhythm that felt embarrassingly disproportionate to the small stage before her. She scanned the tangle of colorful paper trees, the backdrop of hand-painted stars, and her chest squeezed with a mix of nerves and pride so big it almost hurt. Then from stage left, Lucas appeared. Her breath caught. He wore a little navy blazer over a crisp shirt that Sofia had ironed twice that morning, fussing over every wrinkle like it was his passport to another universe. His hair was still stubbornly cowlicked on the right, but his grin, bright, gap-toothed, impossibly brave, was flawless. He spotted her instantly. Even across the bright wash of stage lights, his eyes found hers, and he lifted one tiny hand in a quick wave. Sofia's heart all but broke open. She waved back, blinking furiously to keep everything in focus. The kids arranged themselves in 2 uneven rows. A teacher crouched at the side stage, whispering last-minute reminders. Sofia watched Lucas's shoulders rise and fall as he sucked in a deep breath, then glanced again at her, his silent anchor in a room that had once felt too big, too loud, too threatening. Music started. It was a cheerful, slightly off-key piano track piped through the auditorium speakers. The kids launched into their song, a silly medley about planets and stars and astronauts that half the class forgot the words to by the second verse. Lucas didn't. His voice was small but clear, his face shining with that fierce, sweet determination he always wore when he was trying hard. When it ended, he stepped forward for his solo recitation, 2 short lines about chasing comets, holding out your hands to catch wonder. Sofia couldn't breathe. Not because she feared he'd freeze or stumble, but because this moment right here was everything she'd fought for. Lucas's voice rang out high and sure. He didn't rush, he didn't flinch, and when he finished, he flashed her a triumphant smile. Sofia clapped so hard her palms stung. Tears spilled over anyway. Around her, parents beamed at their own kids, the principal snapped pictures on her phone, and someone's baby let out a loud, delighted squeal. But for Sofia, the world had narrowed to one small boy on a painted stage, learning right then that his voice was meant to be heard, not silenced. That was the entire universe condensed into a single breath. After the show, the hallway outside the auditorium turned into a riot of hugs, bouquets of cheap grocery store flowers and crinkling treat bags. Lucas launched himself at her the second he spotted her, his face red with excitement. "Mom, did you hear me? I didn't mess up at all." "I heard every single word, baby. You were perfect." She kissed his hair, breathing in the sweaty, sweet scent of performance nerves. "I'm so proud of you, I think my heart might explode." He giggled, squirming in her grip, then pulled back to beam at her. They stepped outside into the cool evening. The sky overhead painted a deep, gentle blue. As they walked toward the car, Sofia's phone buzzed in her pocket. She almost ignored it, unwilling to let anything intrude on the warm glow of Lucas's triumph. But then she saw the name. "Caleb?" She answered on the 3rd ring, heart giving a funny, fluttering skip. "Hey," he said, his voice edged with excitement. "Sorry to ambush your evening. I just came out of a late planning meeting and your name came up. I didn't want to wait to tell you." "Oh," she laughed, a little nerves prickling up her spine. "You sound very mysterious." "It's a good kind of mysterious. Remember that community revitalization project I mentioned a few weeks ago? The one looking for an architect who understands both historical preservation and modern sustainability." Her breath caught. "Yes. Well, you're their top pick. I pushed your portfolio hard, Sofia. Your work on small-scale adaptive reuse is exactly what they want. They'd like to meet with you next week. Talk about contracts, timelines, real commitments. It's all yours if you want it." For a beat, she couldn't even form words. She pressed her hand to her mouth, felt tears spring up for the second time that evening. "Caleb," her voice cracked, "I don't even know what to say." "Say yes," he chuckled softly, "and know that you earned this completely on your own. What you did for your family, it wasn't just brave on a personal level. It proved you're someone who'll fight for the right thing no matter how hard. That's exactly who I'd trust with a project like this." Sofia leaned against the side of the car, her knees weak. "Then yes. God, yes. Tell them I'd love to talk." "Good," Caleb said, a smile clear in his tone. "I'll email the details. And Sofia, I hope you're celebrating tonight. You deserve to." "I am," she whispered, "more than I can explain." Later, back in their little apartment, Lucas plopped onto the couch with a triumphant sigh. "I want to stay up late tonight, because I was brave on stage." Sofia grinned, dropping down beside him. "How late are we talking? Midnight 3 in the morning?" He giggled. "Maybe 11, so we can eat popcorn and watch a movie." "Deal." They piled blankets on top of themselves, Lucas tucking close against her side. The movie barely mattered, some animated adventure they'd seen 3 times already. What mattered was the way Lucas kept leaning over to say, "Remember when I did my speech today? I didn't even forget the comment line." And Sofia would laugh and squeeze his hand each time, letting it echo a little longer inside her chest. Hours later, the credits rolled, the popcorn was gone, and Lucas drifted asleep halfway through, telling a story about a spaceship dog. Sofia carried him to bed, then stood for a moment in his doorway, watching him breathe. This was family. Not a mansion with locked drawers and whispered secrets, not wine glasses clinking over someone's carefully polished shame. Just two people learning how to hold each other's hearts gently with fierce joy. She made herself a cup of tea and stepped onto their narrow balcony. The city was quiet now, lights winking in windows like patient eyes. In her mind, she replayed Lucas's voice on that stage, then Caleb's words on the phone. A new chapter, a career that was hers forged from her own steady work and long nights, a home that rang with Lucas's unburdened laughter. She pressed her hand over her heart and let herself smile so wide it almost hurt. Tomorrow would bring more decisions, more gentle rebuilding, but tonight was a small, perfect victory. And Sofia finally understood that this too was the shape of triumph, soft human echoing with laughter utterly free.